I was 11 years old when this happened. Ariel, my older sister, was 14, and Belle, my younger sister, was 8. My dad, a freelance programmer, had just completed a major project, and to celebrate, we planned a movie night watching Final Destination. Dad loved scary movies and enjoyed scaring us. In the midst of the movie, the phone rang, leading Dad to pause and answer. He returned with Mom after a brief conversation, announcing that we would be spending the weekend in a cabin. Apparently, the client he worked for owned a cabin by a mountain lake and generously offered it to us for a reduced price. Excitement filled the air, and on Thursday, we embarked on a 2.5-hour drive to the mountains. Upon arriving, we explored the ranch-style cabin and discovered a small nook perfect for games. Mom and Dad got the large room, Ariel claimed a smaller one, and Belle and I settled into a room with a queen-sized bed. However, a locked closet puzzled us, and its contents remained a mystery. We went to bed around 11 o'clock. I slept near the lamp because Belle tended to kick in her sleep. I fell asleep quickly, but was abruptly awakened by Belle gripping my arm, trying to burrow under me. She was scared, squeaking in fright. When I sat up and looked towards her, I saw a pale, human-shaped figure moving away from the window. Instantly, I pulled Belle out of bed and rushed to our parents, who dismissed our fears. Returning to our room, Belle and I switched positions, and I told her a story to help her sleep. Morning came, and after exploring around the lake, we spent the day in a nearby town. Laughter filled the air as we approached the cabin, but Dad suddenly halted us, pushing the door open with ease. It wasn't latched, raising suspicion. Entering cautiously, Dad disappeared for a few minutes before rejoining us with a frown. He locked the door, and Ariel tried to distract us with a board game. Dad eventually announced bedtime at 9 o'clock, much to Ariel's dissatisfaction. As they argued, Belle and I went to bed, Belle by the window and me by the lamp. Later, Dad rushed into our room, scooped up Belle, and grabbed my hand. In the hallway, Ariel was being treated similarly by Mom. A high-pitched whine emanated from the living room, and our dog, Duchess, appeared anxious by the back door. Dad didn't release our hands as he rushed us to the van, and we drove home in silence. It took half an hour for Duchess to calm down. Dad explained to Ariel the next day, but Belle and I only learned the full story years later. Dad had heard moaning outside his window that night. Discovering the front door unlocked, kitchen items moved, and Duchess growling at the slightly open back door, he secured the house and evacuated us. Returning the next day to retrieve our belongings and finding multiple footprints outside Belle's and my window. I had been invited by my friend Kate to a party thrown by her friend Susan. Kate and Susan had gone to a Catholic school together during elementary and middle school, but they grew apart in high school. However, for Susan's birthday, her parents had rented a cabin for her, a tradition they had started the previous year. Kate and I drove to the isolated cabin, surrounded by woods, for the celebration. As we arrived, the darkness enveloped the surroundings, and we had to use our phones to navigate. Once inside, everything seemed fine, and the birthday girl appeared to be having a great time. However, there was an odd divide among the partygoers that Kate and I were unaware of. We joked about how the party in a cabin in the woods seemed like the beginning of a horror film, aware of the cliché. As the night progressed, a strange incident unfolded. A group of people at the party, including a guy with our city's name tattooed on his neck, was asked to leave. Rumors circulated that a ranger was on the way, and the group, fearing consequences, departed. However, the situation took an unexpected turn when one of the departing girls returned, loudly announcing her birthday wishes to Susan. Suddenly, windows were being broken, chaos erupted, and there were shouts of someone having a gun. Amidst the confusion, Kate and I remained in the cabin, unsure of how to process the unfolding events. Some people went outside to check if the group was still around. Eventually, most of the partygoers left, fearing the potential danger. 3 girls, initially planning to stay the night, hastily gathered their belongings to leave but immediately returned when they heard a scream from the woods. The scream turned out to be a newcomer expressing excitement, causing a mix of fear and relief. Kate and I stayed at the cabin for a couple more hours, reluctant to leave Susan alone. By 2 a.m., only a few people were left, and we decided to leave. Despite the frightening experience, the potential gangsters did not return. The group debated calling the police, but concerns about underage drinking and Susan's worry about her parents finding out led them to avoid involving law enforcement. The night, though scary, was dominated by the eerie setting of a cabin in the woods during a party hosted by Catholic schoolgirls. My friend Lily owns a cabin on a lake in Washington, and one summer she invited me and her cousin Evan to join her. It had been a delightful couple of days, and on the last night, just like the previous ones, we decided to go fishing at the lake, which was only a 5-minute walk from her cabin. It was around 7 p.m., and the fishing conditions were perfect at that hour. To reach the beach, however, we had to walk through a small section of woods, the trail in the middle, usually occupied by joggers and families during the day, led to another nearby beach. Our beach was more secluded, with no trail to get there. The descent was steep and slippery, requiring all 4s to climb back up. We stayed at the beach until around 8:30, just sitting in the dark and relaxing. Realizing it had gotten dark, I suggested to Lily and Evan that we should head home. They agreed, and we packed up our gear. It was the latest we had stayed out at the beach, and my overactive, scary movie-powered imagination started to make me a bit uneasy. Silently, we walked up the hill. I shared my unease about the place being creepy at night, and Evan decided to make it even worse by telling us a story about mountain men from the 60s. Supposedly, they lived in the woods and were part of some cult, responsible for murders in the area. While internally terrified, I urged Evan to stop trying to scare us, but his tale lingered in my mind. As we crossed the trail, Evan suddenly stopped and looked to our right, appearing scared. Lily dismissed him as being stupid, and we began climbing the steepest part of the hill on all 4s. Evan forcefully grabbed both of us by the arms, directing our attention to where he was looking. At first, I couldn't see anything, but as my eyes adjusted, I spotted a large figure, presumably a man, stumbling toward us. As kids, we panicked and scrambled up the hill as fast as we could. Glancing back, we saw the man running or stumbling quicker towards us. We finally got over the hill and sprinted across the road to Lily's cabin. Initially, it might sound innocent, but there was a deep feeling of dread seeing that man on the trail. I didn't believe he had good intentions. Upon reaching the cabin, we threw our gear on the porch and ran to the front door, which, of course, was locked. Lily's family had a secret knock, a fairly complicated rhythm indicating that the person at the door was a family member or friend. Lily and Evan banged on the door with the family knock. While waiting, I looked around, searching for the man who had followed us, but saw nothing. Once inside, in a state of panic, we told the adults the whole story. They dismissed it as probably just some guy whom we made feel bad. Despite our disagreement, we felt safe in the locked cabin with the grown-ups. The cabin had a walkout basement, not a creepy one, with a door and windows where Lily and I slept on bunk beds. After about 5 minutes of calming down, we heard the family knock. Initially thinking it was Evan trying to come in, I said, "Come in," but there was no response. It happened again, and we realized it was coming from outside, at the window. Lily and I turned white, staring at each other with that horrible feeling of terror in our stomachs. It happened again. more frantically this time. We ran to the stairway door and raced up to the living room, where Lily's family and Evan were. Tearfully, we recounted what we had heard, and Evan went downstairs to listen. He confirmed it was the knock. Lily's uncle, older brother, and older cousin gathered flashlights to investigate outside. The knocking continued, now at the front door, and Lily's uncle decided to call the police. He informed the police that someone was trying to get into his cabin, unsure of their intentions. The knocking persisted for another 2 minutes or so, and finally, it stopped. 5 minutes after the call, the police arrived, pounding loudly and yelling through the door. Lily's uncle looked out a window and saw other police officers searching around for the intruder. The police asked us kids what had happened in the woods, and we recounted the entire story. They never found anyone, but the unsettling knocking on the door will stay with me forever. The officer suggested it was probably just some twisted individual wanting to frighten kids. But what disturbed me the most was that the person had memorized the complicated family knock. All three of us ended up sleeping on the floor together that night. This is a true story, and every time I recount it, it captivates the attention of everyone in the room. So, in the summer of 2020, my friends Alex, Violet, and I made a decision to embark on a mountain vacation. Cabin fever had taken its toll on us, and we were desperate to break free after settling on a mountain estate. Our plan was to camp and hike at various locations for one night. We thought it would be adventurous to book a cabin in the woods. While Alex's parents had previously rented a fire tower and enjoyed the experience, all we could find was a cabin beside a fire tower. Despite this, it was a cheap, clean, and secluded option. Excited about the prospect of a night where we could be as obnoxious as we pleased, we booked it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, we hatched a plan to drop acid at the cabin. Violet had prepared by bringing an entire sheet of acid tucked away in their bag. As we pulled out of the driveway, a knot formed in the pit of my stomach, an aching feeling that wouldn't let go. I expressed my concerns to Alex and Violet, insisting that dropping acid that night was out of the question. Violet was displeased, and a heated argument ensued. However, I stood my ground, convinced that tripping that night was a bad idea. After the fireworks settled, we finally hit the road. The cabin was approximately 30 minutes away from the nearest town, perched atop a mountain. As we navigated the busted road, spiraling towards the summit, there were no pull-offs or other campsites, just a long, winding road leading to the cabin. Upon reaching the cabin, we settled in, started a fire, and as dusk gave way to night, we heard the unmistakable noise of an engine on the road. Headlights flashed, revealing a side-by-side vehicle carrying 3 kids. Our nerves settled as they smiled, waved, climbed the fire tower, and left. Although we had heard rumors of occasional visitors to the fire tower, they were the only ones we'd seen. We extinguished the fire and moved inside. Heating some hot dogs until they were lukewarm, we ate them quickly and sat in silence, realizing the profound quietude of the remote location. Every rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind through the branches was audible. Accustomed to the white noise of the city, the silence was eerie. Jumping at every noise, too frightened to speak, I decided to break the tension. I cracked open a few wine coolers, passed them to Alex and Violet, and introduced a board game. Soon, we loosened up, laughter filling the cabin. It was the fun time we had envisioned, though more sober than initially planned. Later, we would recall hearing background noises, the snap of a twig or the distant rumble of an engine. Reluctant to disrupt the casual atmosphere, we ignored these sounds until a human hand slapped the window between us 3 times. Instantaneously, we all screamed. Alex dialed 911, put them on speakerphone, and handed his cell to me. Meanwhile, he grabbed poker from the fireplace, passing them around. Violet started calling family members, saying her last goodbyes. As we held our breath, listening for any more noise, a human hand reached up to the window and slapped it 3 times. We were all screaming in an instant. Alex called 911, put them on speakerphone, and handed his cell to me. He grabbed poker from the fireplace and passed them around, while Violet started calling family members, saying her last goodbyes. I held my breath and listened for any more noise. Whoever, or whatever it was, had heard us call 911 and was now making a silent retreat. Dispatch arrived about 20 minutes later, which was fortunate for a 1:00 a.m. emergency call. Their dogs combed the mountain, suggesting it might have been a bear. But their doubtful expressions revealed they didn't believe it. Barely managing to cook those hot dogs, we wondered why a bear would smack the window instead of going for the pan. Moreover, why would a bear knock on the window like a human? And why would it retreat stealthily after our screams? The police had no answers. Only an anecdote. They found a car at the base of the mountain, but no other signs of life. The revelation hit me hard. But Violet and Alex were too frazzled to fully comprehend it. Their car, dusted by our drive up the mountain, was covered in handprints. Handprints that didn't match ours and touched places we hadn't. Hastily, we gathered our belongings and threw them inside, eager to distance ourselves from that wretched cabin. We followed the police, grateful for every pothole that took us further from the ominous mountain. Sleep eluded me as thoughts of that car on the road echoed in my mind. There was nothing else on that mountain, no pull-offs, no other campsites, just the fire tower. Perhaps a visitor sought to spook us during a late-night excursion. But the kids from earlier had their headlights on. Whoever did this had stopped their vehicle further down the road and hiked the rest of the way to avoid being spotted. They sought silence and secrecy, and it was clear that this wasn't a cheap scare. They had planned it. I may never know what the person on the mountain intended for us, whether it was a practical joke or the beginning of a night terror. I'm grateful for Alex's quick thinking in calling 911. I wonder if our visitor knew we had service, as it surely was a welcome surprise for them.